the quiet hills of Bethlehem, where the wind carried the scent of sheep and wild grass across rolling fields, there lived a young shepherd boy named David, the youngest son of Jesse, a man of humble standing but deep faith. And though David was small in stature and often overlooked, even within his own family, there burned inside him a heart that sought God with a sincerity far greater than his years. While his older brothers trained for war and spoke of strength and honor, David learned the secret language of solitude, spending long days and silent nights beneath vast skies scattered with stars, playing his harp and composing songs that rose like incense into the heavens. Songs of praise, trust, fear, courage, and wonder. For in the wilderness he discovered that God was not distant, but near, not silent, but listening. And as he guarded his father's sheep from lions and bears, risking his life with nothing but a sling and unwavering faith, he began to understand that true strength did not come from swords or shields, but from trusting the Lord who made heaven and earth. It was during this season that the prophet Samuel arrived in Bethlehem under God's direction, seeking the one whom God had chosen to be king after Saul, whose heart had turned away from obedience. And though Jesse proudly presented his strong and impressive sons one by one, the Lord whispered to Samuel that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And so, almost as an afterthought, David was called in from the fields, smelling of sheep and sun, his hands rough from work, his eyes bright with innocence and devotion. And when Samuel saw him, the Lord said, "Arise, anoint him." And in that quiet moment oil flowed over the head of a shepherd boy, marking him for a destiny far greater than he could imagine. Yet instead of a crown, he returned to the fields, learning patience in obscurity. For God often prepares kings in hidden places before placing them on visible thrones. Meanwhile, Israel trembled before a giant named Goliath, a warrior of the Philistines, whose height and armor inspired terror. And for 40 days he mocked the armies of the living God, daring anyone to fight him. And seasoned soldiers shook with fear, while young David, sent only to deliver food to his brothers, heard the giant's blasphemous challenge and felt righteous anger rise within him. Not because of pride, but because the honor of God was being defied. And when he volunteered to fight, he was met with laughter and doubt. Yet David spoke not of his own skill, but of the Lord who had delivered him from the paw of the lion and the bear, declaring that the same God would deliver him from this uncircumcised Philistine. Refusing the heavy armor of King Saul because he had not tested it, David stepped onto the battlefield with only a sling, 5 smooth stones, and a faith unshaken by appearances. And as Goliath cursed and advanced, David ran toward him, proclaiming that the battle belonged to the Lord, and with a single stone guided by steady hands and divine purpose, the giant fell, and in that thunderous moment the shepherd became a hero, though he remained humble, knowing victory belonged not to him, but to God. From that day forward, songs were sung of David's triumphs, and his popularity grew, stirring jealousy in King Saul, whose heart darkened with insecurity and fear. And though David served Saul faithfully, playing music to soothe the king's troubled spirit and fighting bravely in battles, Saul's envy turned to hatred, and more than once he hurled a spear at David, seeking to kill the very man who honored him. And thus began years of pursuit and exile, as David fled into deserts and caves, gathering around him a band of distressed and discontented men who would become loyal warriors. And though hunted like a criminal, David refused to lift his hand against Saul, even when given the chance, choosing instead to trust that God would establish him in due time. For he understood that taking a throne by force would forfeit the integrity that qualified him to sit upon it. In lonely caves, David cried out to God in psalms of anguish and hope, wrestling with fear, yet clinging to faith. And through hardship his character was refined like gold and fire, until news came that Saul had fallen in battle. And rather than rejoice, David mourned deeply, honoring the fallen king and his friend Jonathan, whose covenant loyalty had strengthened him in dark times. And eventually the tribe of Judah anointed David as king, and after years of division he was crowned over all Israel, bringing unity to a fractured nation. As king, David captured Jerusalem and established it as the city of David, bringing the Ark of the Covenant there with dancing and celebration, unashamed in his worship, for he cared more for God's presence than for royal dignity. And under his leadership, Israel experienced victories, expansion, and prosperity. Yet even a man after God's own heart was not immune to failure. And one evening, when he should have been at war, David remained in Jerusalem and saw Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. And desire overcame discipline, leading to adultery and then deception. And when Bathsheba became pregnant, David attempted to hide his sin, ultimately arranging for Uriah to be placed in the fiercest battle so he would be killed. And though his plan succeeded in human eyes, it displeased the Lord, who sent the prophet Nathan to confront him with a story that revealed his guilt. And when David realized his sin, he did not harden his heart, but broke in repentance, confessing, "Create in me a clean heart, O God." And though forgiven, he faced consequences that brought turmoil to his household, teaching him that grace restores a relationship, but does not erase the ripple effects of choices. Rebellion rose within his own family as his son, Absalom, conspired to steal the hearts of the people, eventually driving David from Jerusalem. And once again, the king who had known palaces returned to the wilderness, weeping as he crossed the Kidron Valley, betrayed by his own blood. Yet even then, he entrusted himself to God, refusing revenge and praying for mercy. And in time, Absalom's rebellion collapsed, leaving David grieving the loss of his son, crying, "O Absalom, my son," revealing that beneath the armor of leadership beat the tender heart of a father. Through triumph and tragedy, David learned that kingship was less about authority and more about dependence on God. And as years passed, he prepared the way for his son Solomon to build the temple he himself was not permitted to construct, gathering materials and giving instructions, acknowledging that his calling was to prepare rather than complete. And in his final days, he charged Solomon to walk in obedience, reminding him that true success comes from faithfulness to God's commands. And when David died, he left behind not only a kingdom strengthened by courage and repentance, but a legacy of worship captured in psalms that would echo through generations. Words of lament and praise that gave language to human emotion and divine hope. From shepherd boy to giant slayer, from fugitive to king, from sinner to penitent worshiper, David's life unfolded as a tapestry of weakness and strength woven together by grace, demonstrating that God delights in choosing the unlikely, shaping them through obscurity, testing them in adversity, correcting them in failure, and ultimately fulfilling his purposes through hearts that remain tender and responsive. And long after David's throne faded into history, prophets spoke of a greater Son of David who would establish an everlasting kingdom not built on swords or political power but on righteousness and peace. And so the story of David becomes more than a tale of ancient heroism. It becomes a mirror reflecting humanity's frailty, and a window revealing God's steadfast love. A reminder that greatness in God's sight begins in hidden fields of faithfulness, grows through battles fought with trust rather than pride, survives seasons of exile through integrity, and is restored through genuine repentance, proving that the Lord who saw a shepherd in Bethlehem still sees hearts, today calling ordinary people into extraordinary purpose when they dare to believe that the battle belongs to him.